Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fifth and final day of Confetti's 15th Industry Week. It's a very, very exciting week, as I'm sure you've all been able to experience throughout, but it doesn't mean that everything has to stop just yet. We are into a jam-packed games event-filled Friday, of course, being joined later on by the Romeros. But before we get to that point, we, of course, want to welcome Mark Gregory to us today to speak about his experiences as being an indie developer, the challenges and pitfalls that he's encountered, and also to offer his influential advice to ensure that maybe you want to follow those steps as well. Please don't forget to continue to sign up to all your Industry Week events by using the Confetti website, iw.confetti.ac.uk, to ensure that all of those tickets have been booked in. Of course, if you haven't already, please do make sure that you have signed up for the Romeros later, and if you are interested, Gamer as well. Please do continue to make sure you are using the hashtag IW21 on Instagram and Twitter to be in the chance of winning those fantastic prizes as well. Mark does want today's talk to be very, very informal as we run through everything, so please do make sure that you are using the Q&A functionality throughout, and Kyle, who's in the chat, will be pushing those questions through to me as we go. But for now, I want to introduce you to Mark Gregory. Mark, over to you.
Morning, guys. Hope everybody's okay today. Might as well just get started with this. Let me share my screen. Okay, so we're going to go through today about a project that I started about 4 years ago, maybe even 5 now. How far we got with it, the amount of press that we got, how we did that, basically just the whole, it's kind of like a whole breakdown of the entire process. Okay, so a little bit about me first. As you can probably see from the slides, I've got 11 years experience now in games. I started out initially with no formal education in games. My background is very much IT, and I still work in that sector now. But the way that I started into games was I was interested in games, always wanted to make games, had the chance to go to university, didn't do it, decided to go down the IT route, and it kind of always stuck with me and bugged me because I see myself as a bit of a creative. So I had no idea how to make games. So I thought, what's the best way to learn how to make games? And I thought the best way to learn how to make it is to speak to people that make them on a daily basis. I've always enjoyed writing about games as well, so I thought, well, I might as well kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. And I started writing for Inside Mac Games and then moved over to Mac Gamer HQ. By doing that, it allowed me to have exposure to developers on a weekly basis. I'd do weekly interviews, weekly podcasts, and I'd basically just chip away at them constantly about tools, best practices, different types of reading that they do, anything and everything. I became a sponge for learning from them, essentially, because I was just that desperate to learn about it and to know how to do more with it. Once I'd had some knowledge around it, I actually started in the modding scene because I'm traditionally a level designer by trade, shall we say. So I started with the Gears of War 1, which was a UE3 Unreal Engine 3 game, and it came with a modding suite and the PC. This is back in, like, oh my god, it's like 2008, I think, something like that. And then Elder Scrolls Oblivion had a modding suite, and I moved into Amnesia: The Dark Descent, started learning their tool set as well to make levels, and then I finally came across Half-Life 2 and Hammer and Source Engine. And any advice to any designers out there, people that want to be a level designer, would be to use modding suites and to focus on making gameplay for your portfolio. There's a little bit of a industry battle going on, shall we say, at the moment, between some people that seem to think that creating empty spaces in Unreal Engine and filling them with geometry counts as level design against other people like myself that believe that if you want to be a level designer, the best thing to use to show off your skill set is to use a full suite of tools, because effectively as a level designer, we're focusing on gameplay here, and we need a full suite of tools to use. And to use modern tools will allow you to show off that you know that. I'm pretty confident that most students these days can come out of education and learn any engine at this point. So that's a bit of advice from me on that. My first footsteps then into the game development scene were at Pulse Tense Games, where I released 2 projects with the team there. I learned that, well, I didn't learn. I was big on the UDK forums at that point, big into the UDK forums, sorry. So I was looking around for projects. I kind of knew that I wanted to cut my teeth on something creative and something that I could have my own input into, and saw that there was an opening to work on Solarix. And then following that, we did Devoid. And then after that, I kind of decided I wanted to go my own way, and I wanted to try and do things my own way and cultivate my own ideas and be my own boss in a way. So, okay. So what type of games did I want to make? Here are the examples of the types of games that I grew up loving and playing. As you can see, I'm probably old as shit to some of you guys. I'm 36 in a couple of weeks. These are the types of games that I grew up playing and the types of games that I love. It's very immersive sim heavy. I'm sure lots of you guys probably know what immersive sims are now, but first person based experiences with lots of player agency on physics and interactable objects, and you affecting the world around you with your actions. Those are the types of games that I'm interested in. They're also probably the hardest type of games to make as well. So, okay, so what was Solarix? The first project that I worked on. I'll just play a quick video for you guys now.
Walter.
He cannot hear you.
Who is this?
Your antithesis, am I? A friend.
You are the I.
And you are nothing but an automation. I will succeed, and you will fail. It is predetermined.
All I request is that you comprehend the enormity of my decision.
You've slept a long time, Walter, but not as long as you think, and for far longer than you understand.
There is one solution.
There is no free will. There is only progression, or the illusion therein.
Thank you.
Okay, and that was Solarix, which we released in, oops, bear 1 second, there we go. That was Solarix that we released in, oh no, you can see my background. 1 second. Yeah. There we go. And that was Solarix that we released in 2014, April 2014. Solarix was a first-person spiritual successor to Thief, but set in a science fiction universe. It was okay. We did okay with it. We got some good press, some bad press. Sets at a Metacritic at about 55, 60, something like that, I think. So it's okay for a first attempt. So I've got some notes here on it. So like I said, Unreal Engine Forms. Sorry, go on.
Mark, I was gonna ask, as you were working on Solarix, did you have a lot of pressure then? You know, were you and the team, really, wanting to release the best thing that you could, or did you feel that you ended up having to skip out on elements that you weren't as focused on? Do you feel that, as you were learning the process, as you were going through, did that give you challenges that you would encounter as well?
Very much so, because when you're starting in an independent scene and you're starting at grassroots, funding is always an issue. Obviously, everybody's learning, everybody's kind of inexperienced in terms of what does it take to get a project through the door. None of us had ever got a project through the door that worked on that game. So there was that whole hurdle to try and get over, and that hump to get over. And there was a lot of internal infighting, like there is on any creative project that you work on. When creative people come together, there's always conflict at some point. It's just how you manage that conflict, which is the issue. When I joined the team, they'd already been 2 years into development, and I continued to work with them for another 2 years. So 4 years on one thing is a long time when nobody's being paid and everybody's tired and everybody's burnt out at one point or another. But what interested me in joining the team was that they already had a suite of mechanics already in place. I always knew that the premise had legs. They'd already had a smattering of good press already, so I knew that there was going to be some eyes on the project. As soon as you mentioned Deus Ex and System Shock and Thief in the independent scene, at least anyway, you get a certain audience of eyes that are constantly on you, because people who love those games are always starved of those types of games and want those types of games. I knew the engine, obviously, with it being UDK, because of the stuff that I'd done with Gears of War, with the modding scene. And it was an exciting project as well. I got up every day, most days, excited to work on it, because it's the type of game that I wanted to make. And if you're going to be doing this as when you're starting out as an independent, where there is no money, you need to have something that's going to get you out of bed in the morning. If you're not into it and you're not interested in it, you're not going to want to work on it, and you're going to fall away pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And when you wanted to, apply to work with them, were they wanting to see like all of your modding work that you'd done previously, to justify that you were worthy of joining the project? Obviously, 2 years into development, was that something that gave you that foot through the door, so to speak? We all know that when we apply for various jobs, it always says we would like to see that you've got X amount of years of experience working on this. Would you say that modding really helped you then get into that development team and to give you the chance to show your skill set off?
Even on something as even something like this with no budget, and there was always certain requirements that you had to meet. So yeah, I would say so, and I'd say to anybody, a portfolio is the first thing that you guys should be focusing on these days. It seems from the discussions that I'm seeing on Twitter, your portfolio is everything. You need to be making sure that gleams and sings to who you are as a person and as a developer. So after Solarix had released, we moved on to Devoid. Devoid was a prequel to Solarix. So the good things about this were that we already had a suite of mechanics and 3D assets and sounds and VFX and everything kind of and animations already all built into the engine. It was kind of like, okay, what mileage can we get out of this? Walking simulators were just becoming a thing then. I think it's just like half a year later, we did this. And we made it a little bit more philosophical, which is something that the walking simulator genre leans heavily into. So I'll just play you a trailer for this.
Space travel. The art of looking at beautiful things to feel even more lonely, empty, and devoid of life.
Greetings, Human Resources Associate 8538, Elizabeth Woolgather.
Can you trust the lives of crewmen and women into the hands of a machine?
Hannah, we ran the full battery of tests. You're not going to like this. Attention all Sector 2 personnel. As of now, the Megalodon is considered a Level 4 restricted area.
I don't get it. It's like everyone just left.
All is not lost, ma'am. There is another option.
Several staff members have reported hearing unexplained voices.
It's getting real weird down here. They've got the dig site locked up tight.
We are only of use to the mission
so long as we retain our humanity.
We've made an astonishing discovery beneath the surface of the planet.
Maybe the rain will help us spring to life too, here on Ansira. Miss Woolgather, what are you doing?
Major, I simply do not have time to undergo a neurotechnical scan right now.
What did they find here? What knowledge so valuable that it had to be held secret? Space travel.
So as you can see, lots of mystery and lots of mystery in that type of game. And we released that as a standalone game, which was probably a mistake. Looking back at that now, we should have really released that as DLC. We got some criticism for that, and justifiably so. Again, you live and learn. We were with a publisher at that time. Less said about them, the better, I feel. After we'd done that, I kind of decided that I wanted to move on, and I wanted to try and do things my own way.
Mark, I know you said you didn't want to talk about the involvement with the publisher.
Yeah, sure.
But were you getting like a lot of pressure then to release the title? If you were saying that you wish you potentially, in hindsight, should have released it as a DLC episode. Were you just being pressured then by the publisher to say, right, we want to get this out, we've put a lot of time and effort into marketing your product, and did that hamper like the development cycle, would you say?
I wasn't involved in those conversations, if I'm being totally honest. I couldn't say. I just knew from what I've learned about them since that I wouldn't want to work with those people again. So that's all I'll say on that, because I wasn't involved in those conversations. So the reason for wanting to start my own team was to follow my own types of design philosophies, to have my own team, and to begin to start to follow industry standards. Everything that we seem to do at Pulse Tense was always seemed to be very rickety, shall we say. It was all built on unstable ground. We didn't use things like source control. We were using Dropbox as source control. Dropbox is not source control, by the way. We were using Google Drive, things like that. And it was causing us all sorts of headaches when there was myself trying to edit levels, there was Barris who was editing his levels, and then there was a programmer in there as well. So three of us working out something that isn't designed to do that was a real issue, and it caused us a lot of heartache and a lot of repeated work because we didn't have the right systems and processes in place. Simple things like bug tracking, we didn't use any sort of, I don't even think Trello was around then. It's like 2013, so I'm not even sure if something like Trello was around then. And any sort of bug tracking software was kind of all premium products. So as I've alluded to, money was always an issue. So back in 2016, UE4 had just become a thing. I'd started to learn about blueprints, and I'd started to tweak around with the engine, and realized that with this suite of tools built into Unreal Engine, I didn't really, for the types of games that I wanted to make initially, I didn't really need a programmer. I could probably build those myself in blueprints, and that would give me the agency to move things forward myself. So I started to cultivate an idea. I had an idea about what does it mean for a parent to be left by what does it mean for a parent to be left alone? So what does it mean for a parent who goes to work abroad and leaves a child with the other parent? What does that do to the child? What does that do to the other parent that's at home? And what does that do to you when you're the one that's hundreds of miles away, potentially from your family for certain amounts of times? My love for science fiction was obvious at this point. I knew that I wanted a strong female protagonist, somebody like Ripley from the Alien series. I knew I wanted to push that distance between them to the extreme. So So Mars was an obvious candidate. My love of horror as well, so science fiction based horror, so Event Horizon, and then Soma was a massive influence on me as a designer for its world building and its philosophical musings around consciousness and the existential dread that that game builds into you as you go along. So it's kind of like, can I take all of these ideas and mash them together and create something unique? What was Tether? Tether was a first person. So this is kind of like our pitch that we ended up sending to as our PR pitch. So this will loop background later, but this is the PR pitch that I sent out to people. Tether's a first person psychological thriller that's set in a dystopian science fiction universe. What if saving your family meant that you could never see them again? Trapped aboard the derelict science vessel, the Sun. In the aftermath of a failed mission to save Earth from ecological devastation, physicist Leslie Hayes grapples with guilt of leaving her family as she struggles to salvage humanity's hope for a future, weaving deep and personal themes of parenthood, intimacy, and duty against a backdrop of cerebral science fiction and psychological horror. Tether offers a cosmic, character-driven narrative experience, immersive interactivity, detailed environment storytelling, rich atmosphere, combined to create an enveloping game world that rewards exploration and curiosity. So basically, any like those 4 games that I was showing you before, Half-Life, Deus Ex, System Shock, that's kind of those games and Soma, like all mashed into one. That's kind of who Mark Gregory is as a designer, basically, and those types of experiences that I want to create for people. So once I knew what the game was and what the game was going to be, as a team, you kind of all hunkering together and you'll start throwing different ideas in the pot. But one thing that's really important that I don't see a lot of people, so people that I work with, sometimes it's a bit of a struggle to get people to engage completely and immerse themselves completely in what the project is and what the project's going to be. And I'm a big believer in that. But I think that comes from my writing background as well. And that comes from most other writers that I speak to. So, and designers. What we generally tend to do is read, play, and watch as much media around the thematics of the game as possible, and consume as much as possible, because if you're making some thematic based game, then you have to be immersed in every detail of what you're doing. And that way you can cultivate conversations, and you can have deeper conversations with your colleagues and with your team about the types of themes and how you execute upon those and different ideas on how you can implement them into the game.
Mark, just on that point then, when you were working with the team, did you often find yourselves sat down together, either in, outside of us currently social distance lives? Were you ever, like sat down, like let's say we'll go to a pub, we'll, just play the game together so that you can get different perspectives, individual inspirations from it, because of course everyone sees media differently. Everyone will pick up on little themes. Of course, we see it a lot of the time as well. When people review shows, they will look for individual aspects. Did you ever have a part of that drove your development cycle as well?
Well, we were an international team for the most part. There was only myself and Nathan that lived pretty close to each other, but the rest of the guys were either down south in London, or there was, I think, Lebanon. One of the guys was from Lebanon, Eddie, and Ian was from America. So face-to-face meetings with me and Nathan were common occurrence, and we'd actually spend afternoons with each other. He'd come to my house, I'd go to his, and we'd work on stuff together and get things right as we wanted them. And then kind of once a week we'd have team meetings anyway, quick scrums about who's doing what this week, and then any sorts of feedback that we wanted to give face-to-face as opposed to over text channels, because lines and lines of text intimidate some people, and some people prefer to just have lines and lines of text as opposed to having a meeting once a week. So finding a balance for that's important, and finding out what works best for your team. So once we've done that, I started to do some market research, which I think is important to make sure that the game that you're going to be spending the next 2 or 3 years of your life making is viable and has the potential to sell. So here's a screenshot of some facts and figures that I managed to pull from the internet. It's no secret that the industry is very secretive about sales and sales figures. When Steam Spy was taken away, it's probably been more damaging to the indie scene than anything else in the last 10 years, in my opinion, because Steam Spy basically broke it down to the unit, how many units a particular game sold. So you could then go to publishers or investors and say, look, here's my market research. This type of game sells really well. We're making this type of game. Now you don't have that. It's broken down into, I think it's the nearest 10,000 or 15,000 units. And I think that's probably the best part of £200,000 or £300,000, which is a lot of money in the indie scene. You're probably never going to see that type of money anyway, but that's just goes to show how devastating taking Steam Spy away was when Steam did that. So yeah. Okay. When I spoke before about building a team and building an ethos for a team to follow, I had to think about what I could offer with no money. I'd obviously released games before, so I knew how to get a game through the door. I consider myself an incredibly determined person once I set my mind to something. And I knew that I'd have what it would take to finish a project and see it through. The chance to collaborate with others that aren't your peers in your college or your university or friends, even though you're in a relaxed environment like what I try to have at our studio, where we're all kind of working in our own time and we're working towards something, we're all still pretty professional with each other. We all have a laugh and a giggle, but when you're collaborating with people that you don't know and you start to force those relationships, it's pretty much going to be the same as what it would be when you go into a studio anyway. You're going to be forced into working with people that you don't know, and you get to know those people, and it helps you with your interpersonal skills as well. So if you are a little bit introverted, it's going to force you to just take that little step forward and come out inside of your own comfort zone and learn to communicate with people on a daily basis about all sorts of matters. At our studio at the moment, with the project that we're working on, we have our art team are constantly talking to each other. None of them knew each other, so the 2D artists didn't know the 3D artists, and they're working together now, and then they're working with me and they're working with Stuart. There's like 3 of us figuring out what the visuals of the game are going to be and how we implement them and how that affects gameplay. And it's forced all 3 of us all 6 or 7 of us to get to know each other on a daily basis, and forced us to communicate more. We have, and then there's obviously the professional criticism as well. So when you're working with each other, some things won't work on a technical level, and some things just don't work on a visual level, for example, or a mechanic doesn't work. And being able to say this doesn't work, you have to be able to take some criticism. Obviously, it's going to be professional, but some things work and some things don't. I try to give ownership to everybody over their dedicated disciplines. I am not the fountain of all knowledge. I don't know absolutely anything and everything about every discipline in the project. So if you come and work with us while we're working on a project together, I will give you complete control over that section. Everything obviously runs through me at the top end, but you have control over how you want to do it, the workflows and the processes that you want to that you want to follow. I could offer a positive learning environment as well, just due to the amount of contacts and my network that I've built up over the last 11, 12 years. If I don't know, I know somebody who probably does, who would be willing to give you time to learn to do that. My friend David Stanziger, who's the art director at Frictional, has been a massive help with our art team on numerous projects where he's come in and just thrown his eye over stuff. And our art team was always appreciative of having a professional's eyes thrown over it, especially from somebody from such an illustrious studio as that. And the big thing was giving people experience with industry standard tools such as source control, Jira, Trello, Slack, now Discord as well, probably, which we will probably use on a daily basis. But the big one was source control and Jira. Having those on your CV and having working knowledge on that will help you. And if you're going to go down the independent scene, implement those tools straight away to help you and your team, and to help your team improve their own CV as well. And it helps them find a job in the industry. One of our 3D artists has just accepted a job at Cloud Imperium, and the fact that he'd worked with Perforce before and he'd worked with Jira was a little bit of a swaying factor, he said, in the fact that he got a job. So there's proof in the pudding there. Again, here's the industry standard tools that I was talking about. They're all free, except the hosting for your source control server. I think I pay £20 a month for a source control server for the hosting of the server. But you could just host that from your PC at your house and have everybody kind of ruining your bandwidth. So I didn't want to do that for the sake of 20 quid a month. So. Okay, after about 6 months of development, this is what we'd built when we were going to Steam Greenlight for Tether.
I don't know how much time I have. Tell the kids I'm sorry. I wasted time. I did. I didn't stop to think. I didn't listen. I've been so selfish. For what? Family or the job? And I picked the job. I just want to go home. I want to see you. Just know that I love you all. I love you. And I'm sorry.
So that was the Kickstarter trailer, not Kickstarter, sorry, the Greenlight trailer that we did for Tether. It's back in 2016. Greenlight was still a thing at that point, where you could put your game onto Steam's Greenlight system, and then the community would vote if they were interested in seeing your game. We managed to get greenlit within a week, which was gratifying to the team, and we kind of knew at that point there's something in this, and we're on the right path. At that point then, we took our demo that we'd been building. By that point, I think we were about 12 months in by the time we got our first show booking, and we went to Insomnia in Birmingham at the NEC, Insomnia 60, and Ian took the game to MagFest in America, which is one of the bigger shows in the county that he lives in America. We had a strong showing. Again, it was done on a shoestring budget. We kind of had to lie and fudge our way in because we were desperate for feedback from players, and we had to say that the game was closer to releasing than what it actually was. But At that point, we were desperate for feedback that wasn't from friends and wasn't from family. We needed some critical feedback on where we were going. Again, it was done on a shoestring budget. We ended up actually sleeping inside the NEC every night, inside, because there was no money. We didn't have any money for hotels or anything. And we ended up sleeping inside the NEC every night. But it was probably one of the best 4 days I've ever had with Callum and Nathan. We learned so much about the project, what's interesting, what was working, what wasn't. Some tips and advice would be, if you ever go to one of these trade shows, is to stand back and just watch. Don't engage with the player. Let them engage with the game, and you will learn more than you ever will by saying, oh, you need to click this, you need to be there, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then once they'd finished playing, we had a Google questionnaire set up where we would capture everybody's thoughts and feelings on the game, and then we had raw data then that we could take back to the rest of the team to see what was and what wasn't working. We also had a NVIDIA Shadow Play running in the background as well. So we were recording people's play sessions as they were playing as well, and we were recording their microphones and whatnot. So we got some nice scares, and we had a few laughs at that as well when we were reviewing the footage. But the amount that you learn about your game from one of these shows is I can't quantify how much you learn, even from some of the smaller shows as well. You don't have to go to the big ones, even some of the smaller shows where you can be more, where it's more intimate with people. We only had one machine and one booth. So, but at one point in America, I think Ian said there was about 20 people queuing at one point, and 20 people crowded around the screen and watching people, which is a nice feeling when there's people just gathered around one screen to see one game. And he said he heard people talking about it when he was going for a hot dog or something, or going for a beer or something like that. He was hearing people talking about the game as well, saying, have you checked out that game over there? Which was really gratifying. Again, it's always nice to hear that you're on the right lines. I don't think I'll show the gameplay trailer because it's much of a muchness. So everything that we'd pushed out so far, we decided to do a full-on press release when we did the green light. So going back a little bit again now, sorry. When we did the green light launch, we pushed out a press release with the trailer, and we got a lot of feedback from some big publications in the PC gaming space, like the two biggest, Rock Paper Shotgun and PC Gamer. Everybody seemed to really engage with the themes of the game and what the game was aiming to be, and our more philosophical outlook on parenting and parenthood, and a parent being forced to be away from their child and being torn between duty and duty of saving the earth or duty to your family. What comes first? If there is no earth, there is no family. All those types of dilemmas and dramas that Leslie would have been going through as a protagonist. Some bullet points here on why I think that worked. And after speaking to friends in the press, some years later, when the project was dead, these are the reasons that they came back with, and I still think that there's something in there today. Along the way, so after we'd started showing more and more of the game and what the game was going to be, we were approached by a number of different potential partners. We ended up talking preliminary and doing some work with Xbox on getting the game ready to be an Xbox One title. We were working with GOG on some stuff as well, and Tobii Eye Tracking came to us, and we started testing implementation of eye tracking software and the potential of VR as well. You'd be surprised how quickly things move once your game's name gets out there. You'd be surprised at how quickly things start to move and people start to come forward and want to help there. But the hardest thing is getting it out there and getting it in front of people and getting eyeballs on it and marketing your game properly.
Mark,
So-
do you feel then that it was absolutely essential that you did take advantage of those trade shows, even if it did, put you under a little bit of, financial hardship? You mentioned obviously sleeping in the NEC and everything. Do you feel that if you didn't make those commitments, that your game wouldn't have got to the stature that it did?
Yeah, 100%, 100%, definitely. Within the indie space, when you're working with no budget, it's everything is sacrifice. So it's hard to. At one point, I became so obsessed with it. Whilst working a day job, it kind of just it consumes you at some point. It's like how you identify yourself, and then having a wife as well, and a family, and trying to find a balance with that was really, really difficult. But it just becomes so you'll do anything to see it succeed. It kind of becomes like a child to you. It's a strange feeling. You become so attached to it.
What did you do then to manage that workflow? Because as our students will appreciate as well, they might come in for their sessions, then of course they go home and they study, practice on their projects and those sort of things. What kept you motivated? I know you said you're always a driven individual and you like to ensure that project moves through to fruition, but what really kept you motivated to ensure that it was the best that it could be, but also that you didn't compromise on the quality due to investing that much time? Because I'm sure relationships could suffer as well, if you're putting 110% into the work life and then also working as the indie developer on the side.
Yeah, having an incredibly supportive wife. The amount that I've put her through the years, looking back now, but doesn't make me feel like a good husband at times. I really struggled to find that balance, if I'm being honest, at the start. But now, as somebody who's a bit more seasoned with this, I feel like I've found a better balance. In terms of what drove me to want to do this, was just a sheer love for feeling creative and feeling fulfilled and having a purpose to get up. I'd struggled for a while to find my purpose and my calling of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be with my life. And this felt like it was that. I felt like I needed to get this out there, and that's what was driving me.
I've just had a question come through from Matt, and he asks, did you find that you were putting more attention to detail into your work then, to ensure that it could be the best that it could be as you're running through the process?
Yeah. I distinctly remember most nights being up till 2 a.m. to wait to talk to Ian, because Ian was in America, 8 hours time difference. He'd finished work and I'd be submitting my changes to Perforce. We'd have a quick chat at 2 a.m. about what was due to be done, what I'd done, what would need to be done next, and we'd hand over to each other. And then Ian would work through until 2 a.m. because Ian was a lot like myself. Ian now works at Bandai Namco, so he's a narrative design director over there. So it worked out for him, which is amazing. But I'm not saying everybody should have those commitment levels, but that's what I did, and that was my choice, and that's who I am as a person. I ended up paying the price for it ultimately because I burnt out badly. Probably about 12 months later, something along those lines, I burnt out really, really badly and didn't even want to look at a computer for, I think it took me a good 4 months to want to even look at a computer. And when your day job is working in IT as well, that becomes really, really difficult. Because I burnt the candle at both ends. I didn't take care of myself. I was eating terribly as well. I wasn't exercising. I was doing all the things that you shouldn't do. And I fell into the trap of just letting this video game that I was making consume me. After that, then it was time to start pitching the game to prospective publishers. We'd already had some emails from some of the publishers that are on screen here, so we decided to pitch to them first. And we decided to pitch to these guys, and they all came back with certain amounts of feedback. Sorry, so let me go back a slide. So I've got a presentation here, which I've taken the name off the presentation from who the presentation was from. So when you pitch to a publisher, generally they'll send you back a presentation of their thoughts and feelings on the project. So I've taken out anything that tells you who these people were. So Tether's an adventure. This is their review of it. Tether's an adventure game about a mother seeking redemption at the end of time. The focus is on deep atmospheric storytelling through immersive exploration, environmental storytelling. Good, they got that and they understood that. Tether utilizes non-linear exploration to empower the player to discover environment secrets. Puzzles are organically nestled within the story, environment rewarding investigation and ingenuity. Good, right, they understood that as well. So here's about their methodology. And here's their high-level feedback summary of what they thought of the game. They thought that the game had an identity problem. It has a good story, but it lacks a big punch, which is really difficult to do when you're a slow burning game like we were. We built a 30-minute prototype, but we were hoping to make a 3-hour game. So I'm not quite sure how you can have within a 30-minute prototype the big punches when you're slowly building towards everything coming to the ending, essentially. They weren't completely sold on the visuals, completely understandable. For the demo, we actually used marketplace assets because we didn't have a 3D art team at that point. And we were trying to build everything as modular as possible to try and reduce the work, reduce the amount of time that we'd have to spend on the project in terms of waiting for 3D art, because 3D art is probably one of the more slower disciplines. To the art team are always seem to be the ones that are a little bit slower just because of the sheer amount of work that goes into making a 3D model, which is something that I've only just started to learn how to do over the last year or so. So I now have a greater appreciation of how long it actually takes to make something look good and make it shine. They thought that the gameplay, the balance of the gameplay was good, and they thought that the interactivity needed tuning. Don't necessarily agree with that. I've always been a big believer in physics and the power of physics. And if you can see something in the environment, you should be able to pick it up and manipulate it as you would in the real world, because then that creates a simulation of the real world. And that's what I was trying to project into people's minds, so that they were in a real place that they could affect physically. Otherwise, to me, if you're just scrolling your mouse around and you're waiting for the mouse cursor to change to a picture of a book or the picture of a key card or something, you're just playing a different type of game. Then you're just hunting for pixel changes. Then, to me, you're not immersed in the world and what the world is and what the world offers and how you can affect it. There's some initial impressions that they had about there being a strong narrative and a strong atmosphere. They weren't quite sure of the adventure game categorization that we'd put on that. We had quite a few publishers saying that, and then we had quite a few friends saying, well, this is like an evolution of the point and click adventure, which is kind of what a first person games are, a natural evolution of point and click adventures from something as early as Monkey Island, you know, where you're clicking around the screen and you're interacting with objects, you know. They gave us a rating where they broke everything down. So they have it goes into a lot of detail basically. There's a lot of regurgitated expressions and comments that I've made over and over again. But I think it's just good for you guys just to see what type of feedback you can expect to get back from potential publishers. It's good that they picked up on the types of games that inspired us. That was a big like, oh, at least we're on the right track there. We're giving off the right vibes. And the gameplay supporting that. So it seems that they had up to 17 people play the game, and they all gave feedback back. It always makes me laugh here. Number 16 was a weakness of a female protagonist. The guy sounds like a fucking dinosaur, but or girl, could be a dinosaur, but it's more likely a bloke. So they gave us word clouds here, and the larger words obviously mean that that's the more times that those words were spoken in terms of it being strength. There's obviously quite a few weaknesses there. There was no mechanics or features that were so good it made the demo feel like it would stand out. I agreed with that, and that's a philosophy that I've come to. That was a philosophy that I had at one point in terms of being in this space and being in this place and just feeling immersed. I've now come kind of 180 on that, and I'm starting to realize now that mechanics are king, and an overriding gameplay system is king. We've been through the walking simulator genre now. I feel like that genre is ready to evolve and have more interactivity and more gameplay systems, not just input mechanics where you're picking up and you're moving things and you're doing puzzles, but an actual system that all the other mechanics feed into. So that's something that we're theorizing at the moment and we're prototyping at the studio. It's interesting to see how you change as you get older. In terms of the gameplay hooks, it seems that they understood what we were going for, and it seems like we have a good balance in terms of the gameplay. This prototype is available on itch, so if you guys want to download that later, feel free. I've got that slide for that in the presentation. I think that's it for that. I'll just go back to this one. So the feedback from everybody, obviously we didn't get the funding that we wanted. Most of the feedback was that it was an inexperienced team, and for the money that we'd need to make the game, nobody felt comfortable that we would be able to achieve that, which I think is indicative of the industry and where the industry's at. And I've always wanted to be one of those people that leans on the more positive side of things. But I think when you're making your first game, I have a friend called Pete Bottomley who owns White Paper Games. They made The Occupation a couple of years ago, and before that they made Ether 1, and they made Ether 1 straight out of university, started a studio and made Ether 1, and they knuckled down for about 2 years to build that game. And then they didn't have a publisher for that, they self-published, and that then allowed them to that then kind of showed to publishers when there was time to do The Occupation that they had the pedigree to do it, and that they'd already made a successful indie game, and that they were capable. And they kind of had some financial backing of their own at that point, because that game did quite well for them, and it allowed them to have a studio space, be full-time, work for a salary, obviously, which is what everybody needs to do. Video game, everybody needs to get paid at some point, so they have a salary structure now, and their studio is now, I think it's about 15 people big, so 15 people large. So my advice to people would be to knuckle down on your first project and get something through the door, and show that you're capable of doing it. So after that, we decided to go to some local investors to see if they could help us. We got really far down the pipeline with this, and Stuart, who was one of the investors, who was going to introduce me to another group of investors, we were putting together a pitch for them. And again, this comes down to networking and knowing people in and around your local area. In the Warrington area where I live, when I moved here, I actually set up WA Games, which is a game developers mini meetup every month. And then every month we have 2 or 3 speakers from the industry come in and speak to anybody that wants to come along, students, hobbyists, indies, AAA, anybody and everybody that's involved in the game scene, voice actors, everybody. Word got around town that I was doing something like that. Numbers grew. This was pre-COVID, obviously. It's one of the things that I miss most from the this COVID experience that we've had, is not doing this every month. And then by doing that, it introduced me to these investors around the town. We went, the company was already a limited company at that point. So I'd been through that process and set everything up. And then we were in the process of setting up shares in the companies and working out the investment pitch program and how we would go around doing that, and the difference between SEIS and EIS. So SEIS is Secured Entrepreneurship Investment Scheme, and EIS is Entrepreneurship Investment Scheme. The difference being is with the secured is if an investor invests, say, £100,000 into your studio, they will get 50% of that back straight away in their next tax year off their tax bill. And then say if my studio doesn't release that game and the company goes bust, they then get that other 50 grand back from the government off their next year's tax bill. So it's secured money for them. That's a difficult status to get in video games, just due to the fact of, unfortunately, I think it's 97% of first-time studios go bust within the first 2 years of opening, maybe even within the first year, because it's just it's a shark tank out there, essentially, and there's obviously lots of money around, but you need to prove that you're capable of handling that money and having a project out there that's capable of pulling people in and I feel like I'm rambling now, but you get the point. Sorry, you get the point. All of this ended prematurely, unfortunately. I had a personal issue that had come up, and we'd kind of all burnt out at that point, and none of us really wanted to go down that road. The team disbanded. By this point, they were all good friends. We'd done 2 years in the trenches with each other at this point. Everybody had burnt out at some point. Everybody was tired, emotional from it all. And we decided to can the project at that point. So 12 months later, I decided, instead of this project just sitting there on my Perforce server with nobody playing, with nobody experiencing it, and the team's hard work just sitting there and not doing anything for them, I decided to put it up on itch. There's a free downloadable thing that you can download from itch and you can play. And that was my way of saying thank you to the team as well, because now they had something that they could point their portfolio to as a sort of release project of some sort of quality, and it's helped a few of them get jobs in the industry. So it did its job there, which is a nice silver lining to come out the back of it. Off the back of that, we had some loads of Let's Players and loads of people engaging with the game, which was really satisfying and nice. We kind of knew that we had a market. Maybe our market was just too niche. There's just lots of regrets and lots of feelings of pride as well. It's a real mixed bag of emotions when you look back at it. But there's a certain point in this where this guy plays through it and it all clicks for him. And there's a really powerful moment here that I just want to.
For what it's worth, I know I've gone off the deep end a little. I just want to be home.
That's completely reasonable, Kelsey. It really is. All right, we got our updated card. Told you so. What the hell's going on here? Future light cone past. Okay, so is this like the perception of time? World of a moving... Oh, world line of a moving observer. Okay, so... Yeah, looking at the past, looking at the future, I think. It doesn't look like it says anything. Safety is your responsibility. Plastic cup. Man, this game is doing a really good job of incentivizing looking around and then including really cool details to find when you look around. It's doing a fantastic job of that. All right. Go. So Kelsey had higher clearance than me. And you know Peter's not here. I really do. We're experiencing what Kelsey experienced before she died.
Peter?
Aren't we?
I can hear you. Just wait right there.
Is the greenery part of the hallucination? I have a feeling it is. I have a very strong feeling that it is. Most definitely. Most definitely. Yep. It's even got like
Hello?
little
Peter!
wind effects.
Where are you?
We're here? Where are you, kid?
Peter. This... It's all wrong. You shouldn't be here.
Is that... That's an x-ray of teeth inside... Looks like it might be inside their butt. Like, I get that the rectum is right... Or the rectum's right there. So... Is that... Those look like teeth. And an ultrasound. Oh. Oh, shit. This is what was inside Ashley. That's what's going on. She said something was growing inside of her. There's an ultrasound, and whatever it is had this, like, big fucking clump of teeth. Like, I'm assuming this is supposed to be in the area of the uterus. Because it fucking pelvis. Yeah. And judging by the size of that opening, it looks like it might be female. I don't have that much experience with it, but it looks like that is female. Is that what's going on there? Errors occurred to be a blue screen of death. Okay. Devs, let me know if I got that right. I would love to know if that's the case. And if not, then that's fine. But that's just my... Peter, what's up, man? How you doing? You gonna... Are we actually going back to, like, fucking fields and shit?
Do you have to go?
Yes.
But why?
To provide for the family, Peter. Adults go to work. That's the way of the world.
But it's such a long time.
We'll have our weekly video messages.
It's not the same.
It's very important that I go. You're young. You don't know how it used to be. We need this chance, Peter. As a species.
What chance?
A chance to survive.
Survive?
You know what survive means. To live. To be safe.
Safe from what?
Ourselves, mostly.
What? Like me and you?
It's complicated. Hard to explain.
But you're saving us?
I'm trying.
Okay, what the fuck is going on here? I really... God, this is cool. Ball? Okay. Ball. Please? Ball? No? Okay. No. Alright. Oh, there we go. There we go. Nice, and it's even got fucking physics in it. No, you can't end there. Oh, you bastards. I have to know what the tether is, please. Oh, man. That was so good. That was so good. Like, what I was talking about the player still being in control during those scares adds so much more because I feel like I can actually react to the situation. And it did it in that last scene, and that's so fantastic. I just wish that the first one was like that too. This is so good. This is so good. The atmosphere is phenomenal. The art style, really, really gritty, but it works with everything that we're doing. We're alone on some kind of space station, and it's terrifying. The amount of detail in the environment, it incentivizes you to look around and to see what's going on, and you can piece together other people's stories with that. And like, I don't see independent games do that very often, where you can actually like get things out of the environment other than audio logs and key cards. That's the kind of shit that you see in like AAA games. And the fact that like the incentive was there and the reward was there for taking the time to look around and explore is so important to these atmospheric like walking sim horror games, and this does it so well. While I do have some criticisms with the fixed perspective of some of the cutscenes.
Yeah, enough of the criticisms.
Jump scares. The fact that...
But yeah, you can see that at some point it clicks for him, and that eureka moment of he gets it, and as a designer, that's a really powerful and gratifying feeling for not just me, but for the whole team. So when we'd put all these out, where I was sending the videos to the guys as and when they were coming through, because they weren't just colleagues now, they were friends. We weren't working on the project anymore, but it was just nice for them to kind of have that feeling of like, oh, we were working on something that was cool.
Mark, does that really like support your point and emphasize, you know, the involvement of getting other people, you know, to experience your project as well, and of course letting them influence it a little bit as well? Because of course when you gather feedback, I know there's always going to be positive, there's always going to be negatives that associate with anything, and the involvement of getting that is invaluable to any production. Did you feel that sometimes when you got video footage like this, or you know, when you were at the developer conferences, that it changed any of the perspective or anything that you wanted to tweak within the game as well?
Yeah, but it's like games are naturally an iterative process the whole way through development. Obviously, you'll have your pre-production where you'll nail down your fundamentals and your core pillars, and then as you move into development, the production cycle, things are always on the cutting room table, and things are constantly moving. And for some people, that's really, really difficult. I've worked with some developers that have had problems with their work being thrown away because it's just not been hitting the right tone or having the right feeling. But that's just an unfortunate part of the development cycle. It's all for the betterment of the game. There's nothing personal involved in it. It's just all for what suits the creative vision and what doesn't, essentially. And that's the end.
All right then, folks, I'm sure you, much like myself, you've all very much enjoyed this session. So if you can just show some appreciation for Mark in the general chat, do some applause, show any emojis or anything like that. Once again, Mark, a very, very invaluable talk from all of our students, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions that they all want to go through as well. I'm just going to jump in and look at one of these first ones. So would you say that it's been extremely rewarding then and fulfilling to engage with it from like an indie standpoint, jumping in at that point rather than going, you know what, I'm going to go straight in for, you know, like a AAA studio? Do you feel that it's given you that stepping stone as well, you know, to influence your upcoming projects as well that you're working on? I know there's things that you can't discuss, but has that really influenced your development choices as well?
Yeah, massively. Previously, I was coming into this quite thinking, oh, well, I've made a walk-in sim before and I've made Devoid. I can do something similar with this, with Tether, and thinking that would be a simple game to make. Whereas now I'm coming from a more mechanical perspective. Last year, I started playing through the Dark Souls series and playing through Bloodborne. And previously, from a purely design philosophy standpoint, I'd always been terrified of game over because for me at that point, game over was like, I'm at the age now where I'm like, game over, no, I'm done. I'm going to put the controller down. Whereas now, those games have taught me like the power of game over and the agency of it, and that's kind of like a really big driving force in our next game. Whereas we're trying to put a spin on that and build systems and mechanics around supporting that now. When you look at Majora's Mask and Outer Wilds and games like that, they have that similar sort of system, but still follow the similar sorts of guidances that we want to follow as a studio as well, with it being atmospheric and storytelling. Just because you have a game over screen doesn't mean that has to go away, but you have to build your pillars and your systems around that. So.
Okay, another question that's come through. It says, besides the ideation of the game, what would you say are the first 3 big steps that you take when you're working on a project? What will you focus on? Will you want to get something mechanically up and running? Will you want to, shell out an environment? What's important to you?
Probably your theme is probably the most important thing. Mechanics that support the themes, and then like your design pillars. Those are the first 3 things that I now nail down before I even involve anybody else. So from a high level concept stage, those are the 3 things that I nail down before I go to anybody and say, what do you think of this? Are you interested in collaborating on this with me?
One from Josh. He says that he's interested in becoming, an indie developer once he finishes studying. What would you say to help him get started? Would you encourage him to look into modding scenes, or would you encourage him to focus on, just developing a small project? What would your bit of advice be for Josh?
The thing is, you guys have, as students now, have access to so much more education than what I did. I came into this with no formal education. You guys are obviously in higher education with this, so you're going to come out of this process at university and at college with the tools to allow you to work on something by yourself. My advice would be to build something by yourself if you have the capability to do it, and to keep your team small and compact. Because if you start getting into 7, 8, 9, 10 people to work on a project with you, it becomes an issue of like managing those people as well, and ensuring that processes and the pipelines are in place, and the whole thing just becomes the whole process becomes this bigger issue constantly, and there's just more components moving than what you would probably be capable of coping with at that point.
Jumping back from the idea of having, like a positive working environment, you've said that you've got on really well with your teams. How have you dealt with any issues that have come up, where you've had that creative attack on each other, for a much of a better word? Everyone is wanting to push their individual ideas. How have you been able to resolve that? What sort of processes did you go through?
Purely conversation, opening dialogue, without getting, nothing's ever personal. It's just only ever a personal opinion on why something will and won't work. And then you sit down with somebody, you have a conversation, and you hash it out. And it's up to you. It's up to both parties to go into those conversations with an open mind for the betterment of the game. You have to be, in my opinion, you have to be open-minded to everything in the game scene when you're working collaboratively with a group of people. At some point, if you're the creative director, the buck stops with you, and at some point you have to nail down on something and say, no, this has got to stay. You just need to trust me on this. I've had a couple of those conversations recently with this new project, but it's because it's so experimental. We're going into this knowing that it's experimental, and some of the guys have been wanting to go with more well-known systems and mechanics to support things. And I've been saying, no, we're trying to come from this from like an experimental point of view. We're trying to come across as being unique, and we have those conversations. When we have those conversations, do we want to play it safe, or do we want to try and evolve the formula?
I suppose that plays into then, if you're, as an individual team, you're wanting to work on a project, when you're all individually looking at it, you're saying, right, I'd like to release in this schedule, I'd like to try and get the game done by, let's say, in 2 months' time or anything. When you're discussing, do you ever find that you butt heads occasionally as well, you know, in saying that actually we want to take a little bit longer, you know, to polish the game, to refine it? We all know that disappointments happen when games get delayed, but from like an indie perspective, do you feel that you still hold yourself to those high regards if you're saying it's coming out in 2 months' time, that you expect it to still release within those 2 months?
Yeah, definitely. Don't scrimp with your testing phases, and certainly don't not have a testing phase and feedback. When you hit milestones, you should be looking to hit alpha and beta, and when you hit alpha and beta, you should be looking to push that game out to as many industry friends or colleagues or people that you went to uni with or whatever, and getting some eyes on that and getting some critical feedback. And then once you're ready for launch, you should be trying to find some testers essentially and just offering them the game for free as a thank you for bug finding for you and testing and setting up processes and pipelines like Trello, for example, for them to report bugs back to you, which you can then go and hunt down and find. Don't scrimp on, especially if nobody's being paid, and like with us, for example, if nobody's being paid and you're working in this in your own time, you owe it to yourself to kind of push out the best possible product going. But if everybody's kind of working towards a schedule and everybody's got a mortgage and everybody's paid, then and publishers are pressuring you, then it's a conversation that you'd have to have with them, obviously, and saying, look, we need another month or two to do testing. But any publisher worth its salt would take care of the testing for you anyway. They wouldn't have you worrying about finding testing groups for people to bug find and things like that. So
okay, and finally, how can students contact you if they're wanting just to get some feedback on their work? What's the best way to communicate with you?
Probably the best place is Twitter, unfortunately. I'm so obsessed with that app for some reason. It's at @MarkGregory_ is my Twitter handle. Yeah, that's probably the best place to get in touch with me.
All right, and thank you very much. Once again, if the chat can just show some appreciation for Mark, that will be greatly appreciated.